Hi everyone, it's Donnell McAdams back today for our Saturday Facebook Live with So Steady and Westerly Templates. I've got some fun for you today. I've had a lot of people asking about the Quilt As You Go method. So I'm going to show you how that is done. And there is a handout. It's a 3-page handout. I will tell you that it is very complete in the fact that if you're watching with us today, you're going to understand it. But to just hand you this handout without watching is going to be a little bit confusing. So if you don't have the handout, I posted it on the Westerly by Me page. I have posted it on my Facebook page, All Things Sewing and Quilting with Donnell McAdams, or All Things Quilting and Sewing with Donnell McAdams. And I have also posted it on the So Steady page, obviously, along with my website, which is SewBizMarian.com. And you just scroll down a little bit, and in great big orange letters, it says it's today's Facebook Live. And you can click that link and get it. Now, you're going to have a little bit of time to do that because I'm not starting out with this. I'm going to show you a different template today because I need to quilt a couple squares in order to be able to join those together. So today I'm going to be showing you spinning wheels number 27 and what we can do with that. So first of all, I'll lay this aside. Don't get it too far away from me there so that I can still reach it. And we are going to have, I've already got my 12.5-inch squares here. And for the design that I'm going to be doing, I need to have 16 lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set that on there. I guess I started and now it's slipping around on my glider, which is what that's supposed to do, is slip. So I'm going to go ahead and draw these. And then I'm going to lift it off so you can see that I've got those there. I'm going to put my centerpiece in here. And then because, oops, got a little off there. And then because I know that I'm going to be using a thumbtack, I'm going to go ahead and put that thumbtack in there. So I'm going to put it in from the top, and I know I don't have 16 lines yet, but this is my easy way of doing it. So I put it in from the top and then bring it up from the bottom. And because I've got that thumbtack in there, I can then just simply take this and use the center, and it'll rotate much easier. So I'm going to rotate this 45 degrees.
Fonda has a question. How do you determine how many lines you draw for your design?
That is just kind of playing around with it. I will show you my finished design and then you'll see why. This is a little larger because this template comes in multiple sizes, but this is what the finished design will be. So I know how many lines by that. So yeah, that's a good question because there's many times when you're not sure how many lines you need to draw. So I'm going to go ahead and draw all of these. The first time I did this one, I think I drew all 32 lines and found I didn't, oops, I forgot one there. And I'll tell you what, you got to have the lines. You just got to have the lines to line up on. All right, so I've got that there. I've got my thumbtack in the middle. Now this particular template set comes either individually or you can get multiple sizes. So I have 4 different sizes of this design, and I think you'll agree they kind of look like a big mustache. So for the design that I'm doing right now, I am going to be using this template, Circles on Quilts, Spinning Wheels 27, 9.5 inches. So there is a hole right here. And I'm going to just pick whichever line I want to line up on. It doesn't matter. And right out here there is an A, and clear down here there is a B. And so what I'm going to be doing is stitching that pathway. So we'll move over here to the sewing machine. I'm going to put my foot down. First of all, it'd be a good idea if I put it this so that it's set for ruler work stitching. All right, so now when I put that foot down, I can still move underneath there. I'm putting my needle down and bringing my needle up, bringing my foot up, and then I'm just going to floss underneath there. And there's my thread from the back. I'm going to have to get my tweezers. Always handy to keep those curved tweezers, kind of looks like a hockey stick. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this thread out long enough and come right back to my same spot and get my needle right back down where I started. Now I'm going to pull my foot control close enough to me so that I've got the back of it, because I set my machine on a medium speed and turn that foot pedal around to the back. And you'll notice here that template just kind of wanted to rest right there, but it's not lined up here. So I'm just going to pull it so it is lined up, and I'm just going to follow. And I really won't have any trouble because when I get down here, there's a little hook that stops me. And I'm right on the line I'm supposed to be. You can see the line there. So I'm going to straighten it up so you can see what I've got. And then all I do is continue to rotate the template until A, which is where we started back over here, comes to this point. Now I find on this one, this is a perfect one for doing individual blocks because I find it's easier to rotate this whole template. And so again, I'm lining up that line and this line, or this line and this line. It doesn't really matter. And I'm going to stitch to B.
Becky wants to know what chalk marker you use.
I'm using the Clover marker that has the chalk emptied out of it. That's my symbol right there. It's just my piece of pink tape. But I emptied the chalk out and refilled it with Pounce Iron-Off chalk. So that Pounce Iron-Off chalk, when I'm finished, and I happen to have my iron sitting right here, I'll be able to iron that right off. Now I'm rotating again. The Iron-Off chalk only comes in white. If you have a yellow marker and you don't mind changing it, just empty out the yellow chalk and put in the white and you're good to go. Make sure it's the Iron-Off. And you'll notice that right here, this is where I started and I'm right back to here. So this is just going to go continuous around. This was one of my very first templates that I got, believe it or not. That's how crazy I was. And I seriously did not know what to do with it. And so that's why I'm showing you. And I absolutely love this template. And I think you will too, because I'm going to show you a secondary design that you can do with the same template.
Can you tell us the name of that template again?
It's called Circles on Quilts, Spinning Wheels, number 27. So how's everybody doing out there? Let us know where you're viewing from, what you're working on, because this is just going to be repeat till I get around here. Questions are always great. I know that last week we had a lot of questions and everybody commented how much they appreciated the opportunity to hear other people's questions. So if you have a question, don't hesitate. And I'll be honest with you, if I don't know the answer, I'll try to find out, but I will definitely tell you that I don't know it.
Margaret's excited because she just got this template this past week, so it's a time.
Well, Margaret, you picked a good one because it's got a lot of uses, and this is one that would be great for template quilting also, because you can see these finished could be cut out. There's other places in here, so a lot of fun can be had with this template.
Donna wants to know, what do you mean set for ruler work stitching on your machine?
Well, on my machine, I have a foot that is specific to this particular machine. I'm working on a Janome M7 today. And so in order for this to be ready at the right height and everything, I took my machine into the ruler work mode, and then I set this, because this is a very thin bat. I'm using, I think it's a Quilter's Dream Request. It's a very thin bat, so I set it for medium, because I have a couple of extra, actually I set it for light, I'm sorry. I have a couple of options there. Now if your machine, if you just turn it on and you're using a straight stitch, that's fine, but you will have to obviously get your foot adjusted to the right height. In my case, I just needed to set that so that it would adjust it, because it's already a setting on the machine. If you have any issues setting your foot, please don't hesitate to contact. Start out by email, send me a couple of pictures. I will be happy to work with you. I don't know if Susan's on there today or not, our grand prize winner for the shopping cart giveaway last week. But when she was having trouble, we FaceTimed and we got her set up and ready to go. So it's possible to work that way, and you'll be surprised at how much easier it is when you got everything set correct. Now I'm coming to, I think, the next to the last one, so I want to show you what we do. I'm coming down here, and when I turn this around, right down here, which is off the screen, so I'm going to put it back there so you can see it. That's where I need to get to. So in order to do that, I need to measure my 1/4 of an inch, because it's most important that we hit that same spot. So if that means I tweak it a little right or a little left or whatever, it doesn't really matter, because I want my flat side to measure up right against the flat of my template. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this at kind of an odd angle for me to stitch, but then that way you will be able to see all of it. So I'm back to where I started. I can take this out. You guys can see what we've got here. Obviously, if we were doing template quilting, you could cut part of this. You could cut this out. You could cut some of these out, and it would expose the layer underneath. And if you've not seen template quilting, you can go into the university, and there's a class in there. So you could be cutting these out, all different ones.
Mary's got a great question. She said she's seen so many notions and templates. Is there a kit you can buy with everything you need, and where would she purchase that?
You know what? I've thought about putting that together, but I can tell you, first of all, contact your local quilt store, and if you don't see what you want, you can pretty much go to most of the educators' pages. I have a lot of the ruler work dots and things like that on there on my page. You can connect to that through my Facebook page, All Things Quilting and Sewing with Donnell McAdams, because there are a lot of things that you need. We like to sell them separately just because some of the things you might already have and you wouldn't need those. But that's a great question, Mary. So where I'm at right now is I need to raise my foot, first my needle, then my foot, and pull this out so that I can cut my threads so they're long. Now, it does not really matter whether I take threads to the back or bring threads to the front, but since I want my knot hidden, I'm using what is called a cinch side threading needle. This is the package for that. They look like this. Cinch is the company, side threading needles. Now, I always get asked, why do you like the side threading versus the top threading? I had issues with the top threading shearing my thread or shredding my thread. So that's why I like the side threading. So I threaded all 3 of those in there. I'm going to give it a tug. You saw that right there, that really pulled down quite a bit of thread. And I'm going to flip this over so you can see it on the back. And I'm simply going to take 2 threads and tie them together. Well, I think I've just got 1 there. So 2 threads and 2 threads, because I have obviously 4 threads. I'm going to tie those together because we like for the back of our quilt to look just as nice as the front, if at all possible. And once I tie that in a knot, I'm going to then put these back in to that side threading needle, and I'm going to bury them. Now, what I did right there is I twisted my needle first, and I couldn't get anywhere, but I'm going to bury them. So I'm putting the point of my needle in underneath and in the batting. I'm pulling that out, and now when I pull on this, I have buried my knot. So that buries everything. If you'll just take your fabric and kind of pull it up, you can see the fabric pulls up. Then when you go to cut, you can just be a little ways away from your fabric, and it'll just go right back down in the fabric. So that's the cinch side threading needles. So basically, I'm finished with this particular block because I just wanted to do a block so that you could see how that was done.
Before you go, I've got a question about the
thumbtack. Yes.
I just lost it. Joyce from Rhode Island says that she has trouble the thumbtack catching when she's using the spinning wheel template. Is there any way to avoid that?
Ask her what it's catching on. What's it catching on? Because if you don't have a glider, yes, it will catch. So
Can you explain that as well? Because somebody thought you were using a cutting mat earlier.
Oh, yeah, okay. This is a glider. This is actually a cling that fits over my sewing area. So I'm going to pull this all off so that you can see. I have a wish table from Sew Steady. This is my nice large wish table with the drawer and all of that. But even though everything matches up nice and smooth here, and I've polished my table, you still need a glider to cover up this area so that, for example, what she's talking about, even though this is smooth, there's still a different divide in there. So when I put this glider on, and you'll notice that it has a large opening in it, so I can use it all of the time. So I am lining up my side lines with my needle, and I'm lining up the front and the back with the center needle, so that now I can actually even go in there and use my 1/4 of an inch as an exact marking. Now I've got mine off just a bit, so I'm going to fix it because later I want to use it for what I'm going to show you. So now that's a cling. When it doesn't cling anymore, you just wash it, or actually rinse it in warm water, and it will then cling again. Just let it hang to dry and it'll cling again. And so that's what I'm using there. And if I didn't have this on here, right down here is where that spot is. You can kind of see it. That thumbtack, when I went to rotate, would catch on that. But because that's on here, it just moves nice and smooth. So hopefully that answered that question. I'm going to flip this over so you can see what's on the back of mine. I got a thread caught in it. Don't want that. It was just a fabric piece, it looks like. But you can maybe see it. Probably not. It's easier on the other side. So there's what we have for that one.
I had to share this funny from Linda. She said, there's just so many templates that make great designs. Every time you show something new, I want it. Help! I need to join a templates 10-step program.
Oh, no. just keep a little bit of that grocery money back. No, I shouldn't say that. All right, so we're going to show you how to do this design now with the same template, and I'm going to use a larger size than I used. So I used the next to the largest on the other one, but I want this design to be bigger. So I'm going to center this right here on, and I will still need those lines. So let's push this over just a smidge. There we go. And we're going to do our lines here. Now, when I get done with this one, I'll show you how I press those out. Now remember, I just take the edge here, and I take the edge here to connect those lines. At this point, I take just a second to go ahead, stick in my thumbtack, flip it over and find that spot. You don't know how many months I spent trying to get that from the bottom when I finally realized just stick it in from the top. And now I'm going to rotate, and I'm going to set this so you can see what's going on here. We have 2 lines up here. I'm not going to the first one left or right. I'm going to the middle one there. So I'm going like this because I want 16 lines with equal spacing, not just 16 lines with random spacing. So I've got that lined up. We're going to go in here, and I don't know, you can use a lot of different things. I happen to like the Frixon markers, and I put down 2 layers of Starch Savvy first, or Best Press, either one will work. But you could actually take 2 teaspoons of Pounce iron-off powder and mix it with 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. And then you could fill a second one of these, mark your lines because the cinnamon will give it color when you can't see just the white. And then before you iron it off, you don't want to iron the cinnamon, you're just going to take a brush like this and brush off all the cinnamon and then go back and press off the chalk. So that's just a little hint there that you can do. Now, I want to show you the larger template, but I want to get my ruler stickers here, and we'll put them out here if you've never seen them before. This is what they look like. I think, oh, I went the wrong way. There's 3 different colors of ruler stickers, and before I had ruler stickers, I was trying to use little pieces of different colors of whatever on whatever I was doing, and it's not just with templates that I use them. I use them on other things. But on this particular design, this is the larger of what I just did. So the one I just did, I don't even know where, this is it, I guess. This is the one I just did, and this is the larger one. So all of these templates have the same markings. So I'm going to lay my black fabric down here so that I can show you the template. So this template has lines here and here. It has crosshair lines. And so what I'm going to be using this time, instead of, I guess I should turn it over, instead of using the A and B, I'm going to be using this line and this line. That is not the size I'm going to do. I think I left it lay out here. So what I want to do...
We have a couple questions on
Sure.
this. Some people have been putting this in to try and find it online. They're saying that there are 2 different templates.
Okay, that may be true. You may see one that looks like this.
Yes, and another
that has
lady.
the top. You don't want that one because it won't rotate. It won't spin. When we first had it, we had this one, and I did a design that was actually a straight line design, and it was great, but every single time, instead of rotating it, you have to pick it up off of this pen. So you want the one that does not have this piece up here. You can see right there it does that design. Everything is fine. Let's look at the back here. This was the original template, and this is what I did, is this outside design. So if you want to be able to do that outside design, go ahead and get the original, but it only comes in the one size.
So hope that helps, Julie.
Yep, great question. I didn't know that was still on there in that format. I didn't show it to you because I didn't think you would find it on there, but that one only comes in that larger size that way, I believe. All right, so what I'm going to do is this template needs to have a little mark or I'll pass it. It happens every single time to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, just because I follow my pattern, I'm going to pull off a little green arrow for go. This is where I'm starting, right there. And I'm going to pull off a little pink arrow because that's close to red for stop. So I'm going to get that design the same as I use on my arrows, the same as I do on other things. So again, these are called ruler stickers. I'm just going to pop this right down there so that you can see it. If your local quilt store doesn't carry these, I would recommend that you tell them they need to get them because they're perfect for even marking other types of templates so that you keep your lines straight when you're working. Now I want to make sure, I've had so many things up here, I want to make sure I don't have anything under that. I'm going to set this on my pen. I'm going to hold this over here so you can see I'm still lining up this line, and that's where I'm going to be starting. So I'm going to come in underneath here, and we're going to start right there where that green, and I don't like to start right up against my template. So I'm a distance away, I put my foot down, and then I bring it into my position. Needle down, needle up, and now my foot up, and because I left my threads long, I can truly just floss right underneath there, and it'll bring my threads out so that I can just start. So I'm going to pull that into position. You notice my lines are lined up, put my needle down, and now I've got this lined up, and I'm going to stop when I get to that pink arrow. So I'm going to rotate, get my threads out of the way here, line up.
Mary wants to know, if you purchase that large crosshatch ruler, can it be used in small and big templates?
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
When you're marking with your 12
Oh,
inch.
yeah, the crosshair grid. Yes, that can always be done smaller, just as the smaller one can always be done larger.
Sandy asked, is it best to go to a local store to get help jumping into this kind of sewing and designs?
Well, yes, a lot of them may be new to it, but you might be able to encourage them to get in contact with Sew Steady, because we are getting ready to get back out and doing events, plus we are doing Facebook Live events. And so you may be the catalyst that they need to get going on something like this, because as you well know, it is something that if you've not tried it, you're interested in trying it, which means that there's others out there just like you. So I can tell you, I could just do this all the time. I really enjoy it. It's relaxing. There's so much fun to have with the different templates, and I was even designing some templates last night. I'm pretty excited about that, hoping that we'll have those in the fall, just because there's some things that I do all the time, and I wanted to share them and make it easy, so I've been designing some templates. So anyway, we're almost done here, as you can see. And if I can hold a conversation with a group on Facebook and stitch, I'm sure you can do it when you're paying attention with your whole well-being.
So Susan has a question about your pounce. She says, how do you keep the pounce chalk flowing so nicely? Hers compresses in the marker after it sits for a while.
I don't know. I've not ever had that issue. So make sure it's the pounce iron off, that's for sure. We're ready to come back to this one right here. No, we're not. I'm not around. I'm sorry. I got a little ways more to go. I was going to measure something that doesn't need to be measured.
For those, there's a lot of newbies out there, it sounds like.
Awesome.
And Debbie wants to know, she's got the 8-point crosshair ruler, she's got the kit, but where should she start? Is there a video that she should start with?
Is that, you said Debbie?
Yes.
Debbie, if you go back, I believe the date is March 16th or 17th, when we very first started, when the shutdown began. You can find what's called Let's Get Started Template Quilting. That would be your very best way to get going on this. There's my template. Okay, I am ready now to measure this 1/4 inch down here at the bottom, and I'm going to get right back to where I started. And then we're going to be off to learning the quilt as you go method. So I'm going to raise my foot, raise my needle, pull this back. So yes, Debbie, that is a great question. And if any of the rest of you have experienced that and watched that, you know, give Debbie some encouragement that it will really help her. So what I'm doing here is I am pulling that top thread. Oops, I got sidetracked and forgot one of them. I'm pulling those top threads back through to the back, And for those of you that have been with me for a while, you know that I've changed my way of tying this, because before I tied them all together. I'll take this out before I lose that. I usually find them in my shoes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 threads and just tie them in a nice neat knot. 2 times usually does it because you're burying the tails. And so what I'm going to do now with that is take all 4 of them, slide it into that side. I haven't threaded a needle in so long, it makes it so much easier to do. And then I'm going to pull that through. 2 went, 2 didn't. Sometimes we have strays. But if I don't have to thread the needle, it won't really matter. So now I've got 2 positions here. It doesn't again matter. I pull it up a little tighter and pull that down.
So Donna loves the 2 designs you just did. Can she do these on a quilt that's already
It would be
together?
a bit tricky. This one is one that you really have to turn, but if you're comfortable with your templates, I know that you could do it. So that's the spinning wheels, and that's the 2 ways that I work with them. And now what we're going to do is we're going to swing that camera around here, and I want to show them how easy this is to press off. So I've got my wool pressing mat here. For what I'm doing right now, I'm just going to leave that on the back there. You'll see why I do that here in just a minute. I've got my little mini iron. Absolutely love these. The reason why is they never shut off. These actually are not under the same guidelines that the big irons are. So I keep my silicone mat there. Whoops. Didn't mean to pick everything up. I'm going to flip this around and press off those other white lines. They will not come back. Don't worry about all of those other horror stories and things you've heard. Those lines are now gone. So let's lay this one aside, get our big one here. And like I said, I just wanted to have some designs to quilt for you that you'd not seen. At least I don't think you had. And this is one of my very favorite templates. So we've pressed those lines out. And while I'm here, we're going to explain a couple of the first steps that you're going to be needing to do. So if you look at your handout, on the front here of that handout, I'll pull it up here so you can see it. This says instructions for cutting sashing strips for 12-inch finished blocks. Now, I'm doing 9 blocks in this particular one because I have a finished quilt that I'm going to show you. But what I want you to notice is on this one, for 9 blocks, you would need 6 pieces of A, B, C, and D for 12-inch finished blocks. Now you're going to adjust those numbers for however many blocks that you have, and you'll see why in just a second. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these 1 5/8 inch strips, and we're going to press those in half with the right sides out. And that's why I wanted to leave this on here, even though it's my wool mat. I'm going to be spraying some starch on those because it really helps them. And so what I wanted you to see is this is my 1-inch strip. It doesn't get folded in half or anything, but I'm pressing some starch on there, and I don't want that going down into my wool mat. So since this is my perfect ironing board here beside me, I'm just going to do that. I'm going to flip this around, and I'm going to press that strip. Now, when you're pressing the strips in half, and this goes back, you can probably tell I was a home ec teacher. When you're pressing strips in half, and I'm not going to be using this down here, but there was no reason to really cut it off, you don't want to just take this and start pressing and pulling this. What you want to do is get it started, like so, and then come down a ways and lay it in place, and then just kind of use your finger to hold that and come back. If you just start pressing this all the way down, when you get to the end, it'll be over like that. It'll be longer on the top side just because of the nature of fabric. So if you'll just kind of take your finger, that's pressed to there, and then I can press it in between here. I'm going to come back over this way, lay this up against there, and press it again. Now this is not a bias strip. I don't want bias for what I'm going to be doing. And now I'm going to add just a bit of starch on that. And this is that Starch Savvy by June Taylor that I was talking about.
And that's what you also spray on your fabrics before you
use my Frixion pens, or markers. I don't use pens, I use the markers. Don't use the pens. The pens are metal tip and they were never going to glide easily on fabric. So I need 2 strips of each. Let's see what I've already got. This one I already have it pressed in half, but I don't have starch on it.
I'm sorry, Marge sees my shoes.
Oh.
She wants to know where I got them. You're not going to believe where we get our shoes. We get them at Big R. So these came from Big R, or what's now?
They're BOCs.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'll tell you, when they see us coming, they know they're good for probably 3 pairs apiece, because we are sandal people, definitely.
Sandy wants to know, is your silicone mat for that small iron?
Well, you can get smaller ones, but I like the big one because I don't have to have it exactly in the same place all the time. So yeah, this is my last strip I need to press for what I'm going to show you. So there we go with that. And what I'm going to do now is get, Megan, if you'll get in that pile of stuff there that I brought, I have my quilt that's already completed so you can see where we're headed. Yeah, that's it. Now, the fabric that I used, and I'm going to say this before I show it to you because when you see it, some of you will wonder. The fabric that I'm showing you there was actually printed on the diagonal. So this is not bias. This was printed on the diagonal. So this is a joined piece right here, 2 different blocks. And the fabric was printed on the diagonal. And what we're going to be doing is, this is the back. So the 1-inch strip only is exposed a 1/2 inch because a 1/4 of an inch is part of this seam and a 1/4 of an inch is part of that seam. And on the front, we will be stitching this piece this way with that fold and flipping it back and then top stitching right along the edge. Now, for those of you that don't like this little stitching right there, and I left it in white, I could have put that in tan, but this is a teaching quilt right here, so I wanted you to be able to see all of that. That doesn't bother me in the least, but that's how you're able to do it. And you can see right down here, it ended up right on my fabric. So I'm not a hand quilter, or a hand stitcher. Oh, I'm not a hand quilter either, but a hand stitcher. But if you wanted to do this all up to this step and then hand stitch this, you could definitely do that, but you may want to do it the reverse so the hand stitching was on the back. So with that being shown, we'll show it again later, we are going to start the process of how we put this together. So the first thing I need to do is I need to get my 1/4 inch foot on. So what I'm going to do is get my little screwdriver here, and I'm going to take my ruler foot off. While I'm doing that, I'm going to go back to my regular stitches, and I'm going to select a straight stitch. And this happens to be my 1/4 inch foot. I'm putting that on there. And if you had just been ruler quilting and you have to manually raise your feed teeth, you're going to want to do that.
Carla wants to know, why did you starch your strips? Was there a reason for that?
It just makes them manageable. They're a little bit more manageable. Now I want you to notice that on my machine, my needle in the center position is not in the center of my 1/4 inch foot. So I need to set this so that I have that set so that it's in the right position. So now when I'm putting this together, I will be 1/4 of an inch. And you'll notice if I take a straight edge and lay this, I'm going to set the foot down and lay this up against here, I actually can move my, because that foot was not in the center is why I would need to move it. I'm going to move my glider so that now when I set this up against there, you can see it's right up against my line, so I can follow this line if I need to. So the only reason I moved this over is because the way this machine is set up, the 1/4 of an inch foot is over to the left. Now, we are going to stitch these blocks. I would have squared them up, but I had already squared them up pretty much before we started class. We are going to follow the directions on here, and at first it says, you know, find a center and then square them up. If you're making a 12-inch finished block, you're going to square it to 12.5 because you need 1/4 of an inch all the way around to do this technique. If you're going to do a 10-inch finish, you're going to need a 10.5, and therefore you can figure out the rest of it. Blocks are always cut 1/2 inch larger than the finished side. And then we're going to stitch 1/8 of an inch around each of those blocks. And it just makes everything so much easier if we do that. So I'm just going to guide the middle of that side toe there, and I'm going to stitch all the way around these blocks, keeping everything nice and even. And when I get to the end down here, I'm going to leave that needle in, lift up my foot, and I'm going to come around this side. It just makes it easier. And I will tell you, there's a lot of things, and this comes from obviously having a home ec background. There's a lot of things that an additional step may seem like, oh, that's just taking more time. And it's actually not. It's just making it a whole lot easier in the end. So on this one, since I've got a little bit of that extra, I'm kind of splitting the difference, because when I take my 1/4 of an inch, I'll be quite all right with that. Now, I was going to have some of this done ahead of time, and I thought, you know what? Most people, anything done ahead of time, it just gets confusing. So if you're watching me do this, it makes it a little bit more of the fact that it actually is a step in the process. And like I said, this is something that you're going to want to have the instructions, but it's not going to be that the instructions are going to be as valuable to you unless you have this video to watch. All right, so I'm back to the beginning. This is just a temporary. You could even do it in a basting. I like to do it in just a regular 10 to 12 stitches because that seems to hold a lot firmer and doesn't allow for any stretching. I'm going to lay that one aside, and we're going to do the same thing here. You'll notice I start in the center of a block and not in a corner. It just makes it so I can get this nice and flat to begin with. When I get down to the corner, I want to pivot. Some of you may have a machine that will do that. Mine, I just raise it up, put it back down. Some of you are going to have the lift on the back, but this is 1/8 of an inch. Always have your machine set with the needle down because that is like a third hand. Do we have any questions?
They're still having issues on trying to find this patterns or the
handout?
No,
the template.
So I've written it on there and I pinned it to the top, but they want a picture, so I'm seeing if I can find a picture for them.
Okay. Oh, want to stitch too far. Let's get the reverse button there. There we go. A couple of things I'm going to tell you just because I like to give hints and ideas. Whenever you thread your machine, make sure your foot is in the up position because that's the only way the tension discs are open and the thread will get seated in there. And the other thing is never turn your hand wheel in reverse. If you turn it in reverse, down here underneath, these parts are not intended to go in the reverse direction by the hand wheel. They'll reverse, but that's your feed teeth. So those parts down there were never intended to go in a reverse mode. So never do that because it really messes up your machine and your stitching. All right, so we're actually over here, and if you need to make some notes on this, please make some notes. Because what we're going to do is we're going to put this as block 1, the smaller design, and this as block 2. So what you would do is you would lay out your quilt blocks. You would get them in the pattern that you want. If they need to be rotated or whatever, get them laid exactly as you want. Because what we're going to be doing is on block 1, we're going to take this B piece, which doesn't matter in color as far as on the design there, or on the pattern there, because this is the piece that is folded. It's 1 5/8 and it's folded in half. Okay? And so what I'm going to do is that piece is going to go on top. That's why that's pictured like that. It's longer in both directions, so make it longer at the top, make it longer at the bottom. It said to cut this one, I think 14, and mine's about 16. Don't worry about that, it's just fine. I've made it extra dark on this side, which signifies the fold. I'm not sure that, yeah, I did. Over here on the side, I showed that that's the fold side. Okay? So that piece right there is laid even with the right side of your block. And I said it was going to be the other one was first, so let's keep it at that. And put this right on that right side. So that's folded, or that's laid right there even with that. Now I can tell you, I can stitch this and be on to the next step before I could draw all of this. This took a lot of time to get this drawn up here, and the only reason I'm saying that to you is I hope it helps so that you can understand what's going on. Now, we're going to take this block set up here. I'm going to put a couple of pins. You could actually use, Wonder Clips. Megan, for some reason my piece just fell on the floor. Thank you. So I'm going to put those in there, although I probably wouldn't put pins in at this point unless I had to do what I was doing to show you. So now I'm taking one of the pieces that's 1 inch that's starched, because you'll notice this is the back. So I'm going to be flipping this block over, and now I have the back, and I'm putting this one on so that it's wrong side up. And so now what I can do is I can replace my pins and go the other way. I'm going to stitch from this side, so I'm just going to put my pins in so that it's holding both of those. So I'm coming right along here. At this point, you may be able to see how I liked it, why I like to have that starched, because it just really works with me. So I've got the raw edges of the one on the front, and I've got this one upside down. So now I've got that pinned in place along there. I'm going to take this last pin out and bring it to the front. And now I am over, so I've done all of this right here. I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam. So I'm going to leave this thread in so you can see all that I'm doing, although it would make more sense to get the right color of thread. But I want you to see what I'm doing. So I'm going to take my pin out there to start. You'll notice I'm starting off of the edge. Now, I'm going to tell you, if you want something, to guide on, you can use even the piece that we have. If you want to hand me that there, Megan, I'll show them how this is. If you have the circles and straights tool, you have a piece that comes with that that will allow you to take this back off of here, and this is sticky, and then you can stick that right up against there. Now, this will probably be in the way, so come to the front and make that come to the front so you're right up against there. So that way, if you're, having trouble keeping that 1/4 inch seam, just because it's really important. You'll notice my line here is in line, and I can keep it right up against that also. But make sure you keep it so that you are using a 1/4 inch seam and not getting any wider than that.
Okay, we've got a couple questions here. So if
Sure.
Trish wants to know, if we hand sew the final seam, do we do this in reverse?
Yes. This would be on the back, and the other piece would be on
All
the
right.
front.
Belle asks, on the back strip, is that a single layer of fabric?
Yes, ma'am. It's a 1-inch strip, and I'll show you that again here in a second. You guys can see how this is kind of doing this. Don't let that worry you. What I do is I take my pen out ahead of time, and that's where some of you have seen me use this before. This is a clover tube turner. It's not used for this purpose, but you can see how easy that makes that lay down. And it's just something that if you want to do that, you can. Now, while I've got this in this position, I want you to notice, see how this is wider here? That's that back piece. So it's supposed to be that way. And I'm just stitching off the edge here. I really don't need to back stitch. I'm just going to go ahead and cut that thread. And now what I've got is this piece. I've got a 1/4 inch seam. On the back, I have the wrong side showing that's going to come out this way. So we're going to just unfortunately have to move down here to the ironing board again. And the way that I like to do it, I am all about what's called setting the seams. So this is the way it came off of the machine. So this is still to the back, this is still laying here, and this is called setting the seams. And although maybe your home ec teacher didn't teach you about that, it really is something that makes a difference. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the back piece and pull it out, and I'm going to press that from the front, because that way I can pull this out as I go right along there. And then I'm going to push this piece back and press from the top, because I want a good flat seam. Don't neglect the pressing. We're using the little iron because I can just butt that right up against there. Now I'm going to flip it to the back and make sure that I've got this all pressed good and flat. If not, just give it a little bit of a press from the back then, and use that edge of the iron to your advantage. Again, I love my little iron because it just can let me get right into where I want to. So this is what it looks like now. This back piece is still a little longer. It didn't change any shape or size. And we're going to go, I'll do it right down here so you can see it. We're going to be going to this part, because what you're going to do is, if you were doing 9 blocks, you would be doing this very same step right here to blocks 1 and 2, 4 and 5, and 7 and 8. It would not get done to your outer edge over here. So you would just start by doing all of those. So I recommend that you put something on your blocks so you know what number they are, and you know whether they're a direction that's up or down or whatever. So that's what you would do on the first rows. In other words, if this was a 4 by 5, let's say you had 4 across, you would be doing this same step to 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, and on down. You just don't do it to the outer row over here. Any questions on that?
Not on that.
You got another question for me?
Well, there's questions on how to find the ruler or the templates, and I think I finally figured out what the confusion is.
Okay. Well, we'll address that. If you keep that to my mind, we'll address it at the end, and maybe I'll just post it somewhere so you can find it, because I can easily post
There is a
it.
question from Donna. What's a good starter kit to use with the rulers as a beginner?
The sampler set 1. That's the best set to get started with, is sampler set 1. Okay, we're going on to the next step here, and so we're going to come back over here to the machine. So this would be the front, and when you're looking at this picture is drawn because at this point all of this is stitched together, and we're now ready to add block 2. So block 2 is going to get flipped over, and that's why I have that little pink color there, because that's block 2. So block 2 is flipped over, and now we just take this piece right here, that's why you want it pressed well, and we are going to put those raw edges together, but we got to remember this edge and this edge have to be lined up, because you don't want to get them offset. So we're going to bring that right up to the edge and make sure that they're lined up here on the top and down here on the bottom. And all we're going to be doing is, and again I'm going to pin it just because I don't want anything to happen here. We're going to pin this in place. And this is why you wanted to have that 1/8 of an inch seam, so that you're not having to worry with all of that being loose. You'll notice that I should talk about this too, that I pin perpendicular to the direction that I'm going to stitch. If you pin this way, you have a chance of things moving on you. You should always pin, or most of the time, pin perpendicular to the way you're going to stitch. And I'm going to set this 1/4 of an inch foot down. Remember, I'm starting off the edge, and I'm going to stitch that 1/4 of an inch. I almost pulled my threads up because I'm so used to doing that when I'm doing my template quilting. I'm guiding that right along there. I'm using this line here. Take out that pin and just put a little bit of pressure on that. I'm not saying pull it, but put a little pressure on it. I'm using a regular standard straight stitch, 12 stitches approximately, 2.5 or 2.4 on your machine. And we're going to stitch off the edge, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut that. Now again, I would be using thread that matches, but I wanted you to be able to see what I'm doing. So just trust me, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to come down here and I'm going to press this back. So I don't think we need to move it. I'm just going to press it, and then I'll show you what it looks like.
We've got a couple people worried about those last edge ones that you're talking about, because you said you're going to do this to 1 and 2 and 4 and 5 and so on.
Yep.
Will you tell them how they can finish that up when you get there?
Yes, ma'am. We'll show you. Okay, so what we've got here is we have our 1/4 of an inches coming together that make that so there's no gap in there, so we don't have to add anything in. So if you look at your picture now, both blocks are right side up, and this, I'm going to press it again, but I wanted you to see what it looks like before it's pressed. This is going to go over this edge, and we are going to stitch right along here. Now let's think about this. If we had already done, for those of you that just asked the question, if we had already done all of these blocks, this block right here would have all of this same thing done to it. And we would just take this third block and add it on just the same. This block on this side would have looked like this block before I stitched it. And so now we would have had the same opportunity over here to take another block, let's pretend this paper's it, and do the same thing. So these are now a row. Then you go and do the next row. And then you go and do the next row. And then you'll notice the last part of the instructions are, where's my first page? Okay, here we go. You will have a piece that's going to go between each row. So each row of this will have a long piece 1 inch, just like up here you had one 14 inches. Now you're going to have one, in this case, 40 inches, if you had 3 12.5-inch blocks. And then you're going to have 2 pieces that are 40 inches that you fold in half, so it forms this. And so that way, after we're finished with this step here, we're going to cut this off, and then we will be turning these lengthwise and doing the same thing with the whole long piece. So don't overthink this. Don't get ahead of yourself as far as where steps happen, because it really is fast and easy. Now I'm going to go back to the iron and I am just going to press this down. So just give me a second here. And I'm using the iron the same way that I did. I'm pressing from the seamed side on block 1 so that it lays over nice and flat. Now the only reason I put that fabric, because right now I don't have it, but the only reason I put that fabric on there was because of the starch. I love my wool pressing mat. So now what I did was I simply press this down this way and it covers everything up, and I'm going to stitch right in the edge there. Now it's really going to kill me to do this, but I'm going to use white thread because I want you to see it, but I would much rather use, you know what, I'll do half white and then I'll change and I'll do the other thread so that you can see it. And you can use a foot that has a guide on it. Let's see what I've got here that I can use. There we go. So I'm going to take this foot off.
Becky asked a question. Does this finished quilt as you go method quilt feel different than a traditional quilt that's got top and batting and backing?
It really doesn't, and the reason that it doesn't is because when this is finished, this meets together and there's no extra layer. It's not like you have overlapped anything. So it really doesn't feel any different. Now my 1/4 inch foot is what we call one that doesn't snap on, snap off. My others do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the ankle on that has the snap on foot and get that in place.
A lot of you who came in late have been asking for where to find the handouts. I repinned that to the top of this thread, so you can find it at all those places at the top of the thread.
And when she says the top of the thread, that means the top of all of this chat. Okay, that's what's fun about these live chats. All right, so here's what I'm going to be doing. You can see my foot has a guide over here, and it has an opening in there. And I'm going to get my needle as far over to that direction as I possibly can. So I'm going to take that and press the plus button, and you can see my needle moving. That's as far as it will go. Well, I didn't go as far as I want it to, so I'm just going to guide right on the inside of that foot. If you have one that lets you get it right over to the edge, then that will be good. So in this case, I'm going to go right against that edge.
Wilhelmina asked, can you quilt over the binding? I think she means this sashing that you're doing. Could you quilt over
Sure.
it?
Yep, because it's no thicker than anything else. Okay, I'm going to cut that so you can see that I've stitched right along that edge, and it shows right there on the back. Now, I would probably have switched that thread to a white, but let me show you what happens when I actually change this top thread to a thread that is the right color. So I'm going to get a thread that is a matching thread so you can see what that whole long one looks like. Now, I want to encourage you guys to give this a try because, like I said, I could have put my whole 9-block quilt together in the time I was drawing those few pictures on there because it just takes so long to get them so that you can, I hope, understand them, because I wanted you to have a diagram to go by. So I'm going to go ahead and thread my needle here and come back. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to join this with, and you can pin this if you want. I find it's just as easy to go right along this edge. So you can see right there, you can hardly even see that well, maybe I don't even, yeah, it's stitched down. Scared me to death there. So it's stitched right along that edge. So when you go to the back, yes, you're going to have a little bit of an over right there. If that bothers you, then you're going to reverse this process. So this will be the front. And when you do this, it will be the back.
I'm going to do a close-up. They've been asking for a close-up. So I'm going to move the camera.
Can they see it in there? Because this right here is where you can see the stitching best, right between my hands. So you can see I've just caught that right along that edge. If I go back up here to the white, you can see it better. It doesn't look good because it's just, you know, out showing out there. But you can see that right along that edge there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch this one more time just a little farther in, because some of you may say, well, I would like to have it closer on the back than it is, and you can do that. I'm going to change my needle position so that it comes a little bit farther in, and you can see what that looks like. So I'm coming along here.
Mary Ann would like to know what pressure foot you are using.
The one I'm using right now, this is on a Janome, and I'm not sure what letter it is. It's got a guide right here on the side, which you really don't need because I'm not out that edge, but I like to have this side right here because, let me explain that. That is actually a great question, okay? Because all of these, this right here, I've got my needle moved to the right. That means all of the feed teeth under here are working for me. If you leave it in the center and move this all over this way, then that's not the case. The feed teeth are not working for you. They're just kind of down there doing something. But since I've got all of this, almost probably 5/8 to 3/4 of my foot is on the fabric that I'm working with, it then is holding that nice and flat for me. So even though I moved in, gosh, you can't hardly tell I moved in much of anything. It's pretty much right still along that edge. So on the back, it did bring it just a little bit closer when I did that. So if you wanted this to be the right side look and you wouldn't have this stitching, just reverse everything. Where I say back, you do front. And then that way, this would be what your front was, and the back would be what has the little bit of stitching showing. But that's the way you would do this. And you would come over here. This one would have already been done, and we would have joined the third one on.
So Susan, that's what you're asking. You would complete the whole row.
Yep, you're going to do your, I like to do horizontal rows first. Your eyes, for some reason, like this better. So do going across with all your short pieces. And then you're going to go the length. So what I'm coming back here is I'm using heavier scissors now because there's a lot of thickness right there. And I'm cutting that off. I'm going to turn this around, and I would have stitched clear to the end and all of that. And I'm going to cut this off, and that's where the heaviness is right there. And now I would be using the long strips. And so this would be my long rows here. This strip would have been pressed in half. It's going to lay all the way across here. Obviously pressed in half. On the back, I would put the other 1-inch strip like this, and I would stitch that down. And then I would be pressing like I did, pressing this one over, and then I would be joining that to the next row.
So we've got a question from Sandy and Lily, and it's the same question. Would a walking foot be helpful for that?
I do not see the need for a walking foot. If you want to use a walking foot, it's a lot of apparatus in a place that you really want to be able to get your fingers into. And so the thickness has not changed on my quilt. And if you were to shut your eyes and go across here like this, there is no bump in the middle of this. Obviously the texture changes because there's the sewing just like a seam, but this is still all flat. When I fold it over, it folds. It's not like it's going to be a big old lump there. You can see how that lays nice and flat when I fold it. Now what I want to do is get the one that's finished back so that you can see that. Because all you're going to do, this is actually the back. This is a teaching quilt, so this is one that I teach from, and so this is teaching people how to do different things with their templates. And so this is actually the back, and all I did was put a binding on it just like I normally would do my binding. It was on the front, turned to the back, and actually I did hand stitch that because I'm kind of a stickler on that one. So I put it on the front, it was a folded, and then I put it to the back. But it's the same width as this in here. So, well, no, it's not. It's a little narrower, but you could do it the same width. But again, this is the back of the quilt. You can see that on this one, that's just right along that edge. This is the front of the quilt. And you can see the stitching right there. And you can choose how you want to do this. In the case of this one, every one of these is tan on one side, cream on the back. Tan on the back side here, cream on the front. And the reason I do that is because I want to be able to see my stitching showing up. So that, for that reason, there's not a way that I'm going to continually match, because if I put tan thread in here to match this, I'm certainly not going to stop down here when I'm going across here and change threads. So you can see on the back of this one right here, that's going to blend in easier. So now let me open this up a little bit.
So the next question is, do you always use a contrasting fabric for your sashing?
Not necessarily. So you can see here, this is an intersection point. You've got on your picture there, I think it's on the first page and the last page, so that you can see what this all looks like. This is not heavy in here. And this is just showing different ways that we can quilt, and the last part of this class was to put it together in the Quilt As You Go method. So I hope this has given you some tips on how to do that, and like I said, don't overthink it. You've always got that you can come back and watch this again. You've got your handout to tell you the strips. Go ahead and cut some, and while you're sewing, stitch it together so you then have a sample like this. Because I can easily take this and keep this as my sample, so the next time if I forget what I did, I've even got an open spot down here that I can look at. But if you cut your threads, get a couple of blocks, you don't even have to stitch them. You could just put a couple stitches or pins or whatever in them. But get yourself a sample real soon so that you can keep it with this handout. And like I said, go ahead and watch this again and stitch yourself a little sample.
Maybe even using all of those from the videos from quarantine. They could
put some
together.
of those together that way. And we don't have to necessarily make this a quilt. This could be a table runner that's never going to get any wider. It could be like 4 or 5 of these, and then just put your edge, your binding on the edge of that.
Would invisible thread be strong enough for sashing?
I'm not a real fan of invisible thread. It's not very forgiving. You can try it. Yes, that would work. Maybe you just want to try it, you know, on a sample first to see what you like. But make sure if you're using invisible thread, it's a good one, because if you have a, you know, one that's real thick and heavy, it's going to just fight you all the way. But that's, you know, that's totally up to you what you do with that.
Susan wants to know, could you use this on a t-shirt quilt?
Sure, why not? You certainly could. And I hate to throw this out there, but if you want this wider, you can figure out your measurements. So like, for example, this is a 1/4 inch seam in between there, so the back strip is going to be a 1/4 inch times 2 plus the over. That's why it's 1. It's like 4 times that measurement. If you wanted this wider and you wanted this to be 1 inch, that back strip, this would be a 1/2 inch and a 1/2 inch. So then I'm not even going to go through all that, because some of you are going to say, that's confusing. I'm not going to go into that, because that does get confusing, because you have a 1/2 inch seam allowance on those rather than a 1/4 inch. So, but you can figure out the measurements if you wanted to do that. So I hope you like this technique. I hope you'll try it, because I absolutely love it. I'm not sure if it's out there on YouTube. I know we've done some of it, but I think today what I did was a better demonstration than what that was. And I hope you like that template, number 27. I think you'll find there's a lot of things you can do with it. Obviously, we got space here. We can still fill this in. And that's the fun thing about when you get this together, you could get your whole quilt together and you could come back and do some more quilting in here. It's not going to be a problem for it.
Which, talking about how to get those templates, can I show them really quick?
Sure.
So a lot of you said that you were getting onto Google and typing in circles on quilt spinning wheel 27 and getting all sorts of things. So if you go down here to the Sew Steady, it'll come up. This obviously does not look like what Donnell did today. So you go down here to the bottom and you click, and then it gives you all of the different kinds. So then she was using 27, the 7.5, and the 11.5, right? Mm-hmm. So if you click on that, then it will show you the right one that looks like the mustache.
Perfect. So yeah, it's when it shows you circles on quilts, it's going to show you one, but there's a whole bunch of others. So you can scroll down when you hit that.
So again,
show them again.
Okay, so I went to the Google and I clicked on it. This is what came up. Okay, and if it doesn't come up right away, you might go over here to these 3 bars and click products, and then I just typed in circles on quilt spinning wheel. Then down here under product name, you will click on the plus, and there's a ton of different spinning wheels. So you need to try to find the 27, either the 7.5 or the 11.5. This picture down here will not change. That's not this design. So make sure you're looking at the one on the top up here.
Right, and that's why I try to show you some of these, and that's why I picked this one for today, is because I wanted you to be able to see how to actually use it, because that instruction down there in the bottom, like she said, is never going to change, and it's certainly never going to show you how to use that 27. So again, I will tell you, if you have things that you're interested in seeing or learning about, or a particular template, don't hesitate to let me know, because when we do these lives on Saturday night, sometimes it's 2 in the afternoon. Well, not 2 for you, but 2 for us here, which means we've got 3 hours, because it's at 5 o'clock Eastern time, and we don't have a clue what we're going to do, and it's just a matter of pulling something out and playing with it, because honestly, I want you to get more familiar with whatever, like the outer rim tool. We've done that several times, because I know myself, some of these templates I've had to really work with to get to where I want with them. So don't hesitate to ask. We love to show you what you want to see. So this is the star that we did just a couple of weeks ago. So if you were with us when we did that, I think it's all on there. And this is showing it this way. We actually do it like this. But I think I'm going to realign this, because I do like the fact that this is kind of like a Bethlehem star. So Any other questions for today? I really enjoy being with you.
Does this quilt have a pattern?
This quilt does not have a pattern, but it may soon be a class, like a 9 block of the month, where it's a beginner learning how to use your templates, because this is all done with the sampler set. So this would be a good one to get started with.
So all of our newbies, this is the set you would use, right?
Yeah, this is the set you would have with the sampler set. So,
and remind them where they can see the videos. And the other question is, will the quarantine videos still be up? Do we have a time limit on how long they will be up?
I'm not sure how long they're going to be up. I know some of them are moving into the university. So if you don't find it out there, go to the university. Because some of them might be in there. Some of them have moved to paid classes now. So if you wanted to, take the class, that's what that's there for. And when you have it as a paid class, you're definitely going to get, full handouts on it. So I'm not sure what we're going to be doing. We may have a class on this particular technique that actually takes you through assembling like 4 blocks together. And so, that way you may be a step ahead when you're doing this, but that may be a class too. So
before you go, they want you to move it up so they can see the bottom.
Oh, they haven't seen the bottom. Okay. Well, again, this was a teaching block, this one right here. So this is actually Spinning Wheels 36 used with a Echo guide. The same with this. This is Spinning Wheels, the same as this one, used with an Echo guide to make it look like that. This one we started on this side and went all the way across and stopped on this side. So you can see how you can join designs together. This is the large size of the scallop template. And this is using the spiral template here. And then this is another what I call teaching block, because this one we actually did scallops along the edge here. We did our border with the scallop and template in 2 sizes. It showed how we could do circles with it. And then obviously, the little ones like the large there. And then this is actually the half moon shape. I'm trying to even think what that's, 4-inch arc. And you've seen the other one here, and then this is merging templates and using templates in the corner so that they overlap to get a design there. And then this was used with the 12.5 or the 12-inch arc, Spinifex 4, and then this is just using our 12-inch arc on the straight side. And many of you have probably done this one because this is using Spinning Wheels 36. So thanks for joining us today. We'll be back next Saturday. I hope everyone has a great time tomorrow. Many are probably going to be with families for Father's Day. And so we'll see you then. Thanks for joining us, and bye for now.